Croeso. I'll run through some housekeeping points before business starts. I'd like to remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived on the Council's website for future viewing. This meeting will be translated and broadcast with and without translation via the Council's YouTube channel. Please could all requests to speak be made through me during the meeting. If a participant wants to speak, can they please raise their hand and wait to be introduced? Requests from participants in the chamber will be monitored by me and the Vice Chair. Requests from participants attending remotely will appear on my screen once they select the raise hand button located on the bottom left-hand side of their screen. When invited to speak by me, please could all participants make sure that their microphone and camera is on so that they can be seen and heard when taking part. Chamber participants may come onto screen by pressing the large activation button on their desktop microphone. Remote attendees may come on screen by pressing the large activation button in the bottom centre of their screen. No other buttons are required to participate and should be left unmuted. If a participant chooses to speak in Welsh during the meeting, those listening can choose to access an English translation, thanks to our translator. For chamber participants, handheld translation devices are available on the desk for you to use throughout the meeting. Please ensure you are connected to channel 1. For remote participants, translation audio is available via the audio tab on the right-hand side of your screen. Please select the English audio option. Please note that you won't be able to hear the translation if you are active on screen. And for remote participants only, please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat facility for the sake of the recording. A fire drill is not expected in the building today, so if the alarm sounds, please could all chamber participants follow the democratic officer to the nearest assembly point at the front of the building. For remote attendees, please stay connected to the meeting and proceedings will resume as soon as possible. Advice in relation to voting will be provided when the vote takes place. Agenda item 1, apologies of absence. I'm aware of Councillor Ernest, Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Hennessy and Councillor Michael Morgan. Do we have any others? Councillor Carroll.
Councillor Christine Cave and Councillor Bruce is having difficulties logging on, but she will join the meeting as soon as she is able.
Thank you. Any others? No. Okay. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Chief Executive, do we have any and what are their nature, please?
Yeah, could I ask if any members have any declarations of interest? I think in relation to the motion on ALN budgets, I'm guessing that's why most hands have gone up. And I think you've seen the monitoring officer's advice. So if that is the nature of your interest, I think we can take that en bloc if you're all governors. So if anybody has any other declarations of interest, please raise your hands now. Councillor Hodges? Schoolboy error. Councillor Nick Hodges.
Thank you. Agenda 12, can I declare that my wife, Councillor Shirley Hodges, is an employee of the DWP. I do not regard this as prejudicial and I will remain and vote. Thank you.
And Councillor Shirley Hodges.
Thank you. This is Councillor Shirley Hodges and I'm an employee of the Department for Work and Pensions, and having considered the nature of this motion, I don't believe that I have a prejudicial interest and I will be taking part in voting.
Thank you very much. Any other declarations of interest?
Lloyd Selby online.
Councillor Lloyd Selby.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item 12, the notion of motion. I'm a member of the Cardiff and Vale Health Board, and I consider that my involvement means I have a personal and prejudicial interest in this item, so I'll leave the meeting for the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I can see Councillor Franks, you've got your hands up as well.
Thank you. I think I'm covered. I didn't fully grasp it. The ALN, we've all declared en bloc. Is that the situation?
Yes, we've taken it on block. You will all have seen the advice, so we've taken that as read, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, to approve the minutes of the last 2 meetings. Is Council happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of March this year? There's no dissent, so I'll assume that's a yes. And the same for the 13th of May this year. Great, so the minutes are approved. And it would be remiss of me to go any further this evening without congratulating Shirley Hodges, our newest member. Llongyfarchiadau mawr. And I'm very happy to be chairing my first full council as mayor. Rwy'n falch iawn o gael fod yma fel maer.
I am very pleased to be here as a mayor.
Enjoyed being a guest at a civic event in Dinas Powys during the first heatwave, then celebrating our diverse heritage to mark Windrush Day at Jenner Park, as well as Armed Forces Day during the second heatwave. And yesterday was a day in the sun for Cowbridge Town, as we've already heard tonight. And I see that the heatwaves and climate change come up on our agenda this evening, which is fitting during heatwave number 3. Arweinydd, Leader, do you have any announcements?
Diolch, Mayor. Yes, I would like to congratulate residents of the Vale of Glamorgan who were recently honoured in the King's Birthday Honours list. They are receiving the British Empire Medal, Carmen Soraya Kelly and David Gerald Gardner. Awarded the MBE is Roger Charles Lewis, Howell Thomas Baker and Christopher David Britton, who many of us know as Chris, our former head of Scholarderry. Receiving an OBE is Professor Stephen Jollies, and a CBE was Anthony Richard Negus. I'd also like to extend my congratulations for her appointment as a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire to Dame Heather Stevens of the Waterloo Foundation. And just note that Heather, through the Waterloo Foundation, a foundation that was established in 2007 between Heather and her husband David, has transformed so many lives, both in Wales, in the Vale, and actually across the world. They focus on child development, health, environmental sustainability, and actually have supported so many. I was trying to count up how many people have been able to start businesses in the Vale as a result of their support. So our heartfelt thanks to them, but also our specific warmest congratulations to Dame Heather. Thank you.
Diolch, Arweinydd. Brif Weithredwr, Chief Exec, do you have any announcements? No. I think there is an announcement from Cabinet Member Mark Wilson.
Yeah, can I thank our staff, our frontline staff in particular, who have worked so hard in very challenging conditions for the last few weeks, thanks to our weather. And I will say also to our brilliant residents who have been really, really nice about them as well, because I've had lots of positive comments about how hard they worked in these very challenging conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got a petition. Councillor Ian Johnson.
Diolch.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Does everyone in the room okay for me to continue? I would like to present a petition on behalf of parents and carers and children of Ysgol Cymraeg Sant Curig. We, parents, carers and pupils of Ysgol Cymraeg and Sant Curig, are concerned in the safety of our children crossing the road outside our school. Our school crossing patrol officer has been very faithful but is retiring, and the local authority is not appointing anyone in his place. This leads to risks and safety risks significantly, especially around collection times. Parents see the number of dangerous cases and near misses. The council suggested the school pay for an officer, or the volunteers run the post. Due to budgetary restrictions and safety issues, this is not a practical option. So we call on Vale Glamorgan to reappoint and provide safety measures.
Diolch yn fawr. Agenda item 5, questions from the public. Questions 1 to 10 are all to Cabinet Member Councillor Ruba Sifanyana. And Andrew Vincent is in the public gallery to ask his question in person, I think.
Can you hear me?
We can.
My question is, have the Vale resident submissions from the March 2026 RLDP consultation process been made fully available to all current Vale councillors, that is, unedited by Vale Planning or by any AI software? If not, why not? Thus, can Vale residents be assured that all current Vale councillors should be fully aware of the unedited contents of all these submissions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent, for your question. The full representations made as part of the deposit plan consultation will be made fully available in full to councillors, probably via a link. But obviously, because of some of the responses were quite lengthy, we summarise those when they go into reports. So that's why you'll see in the reports they were summarised, but they will be made fully available to councillors.
Thank you. And the next question is from Mr. William Hart, who's also in the public gallery.
Yes, I've come across many people in the Vale who object to the proposed urban sprawl housing developments around Barry and Dinas, but none who support them. So why do councillors think it's in the best interest of the people they represent to force something onto them that they do not want?
Thank you, Mr. Hart, for your question.
Thank you.
The council has a duty to prepare the development plan, and this must balance a range of priorities, and this includes responding to our housing needs and our economic growth in a way that aligns with national policy as well as our local need. The plan must ensure that the right sites are allocated in the right locations based on robust evidence. I'm pleased with the number of residents who have engaged with us in the recent consultation on the deposit RLDP, and whilst there were many residents who objected to specific sites, we've also received comments from people who support the proposals and who recognise the importance of providing new homes at a time of housing crisis. And, you know, I'm also very mindful of the fact that feedback may not reflect the full range of views, because there'll be many people in our communities who are in the most need of housing, who will not be responding to this to this consultation. And we have a duty to respond to that housing need. And residents should note that there will be an examination into the RLDP where an independent planning inspector will review all the representations received alongside the robust evidence underpinning policies and proposals in the plan. Thank you.
Next question is from Mr. Max Wallis in the public gallery as well.
Thank you. The Cabinet member will be aware that the Green Infrastructure Strategy document issued for the RLDP is deficient in various ways. We're particularly aware that in this heat wave is its failure to list the Vale's bathing beaches and to outline the Vale's management policies under bathing water regulations. And my specific question refers to the strategy's use of...
Mr. Wallis, I'm sorry to interrupt. The question you're reading out isn't the same as the one you've submitted, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So my question refers to the strategy's use of England's biodiversity criterion. The Welsh requirement for new developments is that they be accompanied by biodiversity enhancement, and I quote, proportionate to their scale and nature.
I'm sorry to interrupt again, but that's not the question you've submitted. The question you've submitted, if I may, is this one. Unless you want to read it, if somebody's given you the... What changes has Councillor Rubus Sivanyanam proposed to the deposit RLDP to bring it into line with the Welsh requirement for new developments to be accompanied by biodiversity enhancement proportionate to their scale and nature?
Thank you.
Do you want to finish reading it?
Those are just the words I used. So I'm asking what changes, and I've introduced it by saying it's in the Green Infrastructure Strategy document. But what changes does Councillor Sivanyanam propose to the deposit RLWP to bring it into line with the Welsh requirement and new developments to be accompanied by biodiversity enhancement proportionate to their scale and nature? Reference to PPW 12. The deposit RLWP uses instead the requirement in England, which I quote again is net benefit for biodiversity, and that's in one of the proposals. Will the stronger Welsh requirement be applied retrospectively and appropriate corrections made to the supporting Green Infrastructure Strategy document? Will they be issued?
Thank you, Mr. Wallis.
Can I suggest, Mayor, that if it's a slightly different question, he actually raises that question at the next meeting?
He's welcome to do that as long as he submits it, yes, but I'll ask Ruba Sivanyanam to answer the question submitted.
Yes, so I am expecting an answer to the question that was submitted.
Well, perhaps I could start by thanking Mr. Wallis, first of all, for his questions maybe, and perhaps that he could, his slightly different question, perhaps he could write to me separately about that. I'm very happy to take that. But in answer to the question that was submitted, I can assure him that the RLDP has been prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Policy Wales with regards to biodiversity. The term net benefit for for biodiversity is a Welsh term referenced repeatedly in the policy, in the planning policy for Wales, and the English terminology is for biodiversity net gain. So the Green Infrastructure Strategy was subject to consultation alongside the RLDP, and consideration is currently being given to any amendments that may be necessary to that document in light of representations received. However, it was prepared in line with the latest edition of Planning Policy Wales, and therefore references the most recent biodiversity requirements.
Thank you. The next question, question number 4, has been submitted online and won't be read out. Councillor Sivignon.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent-Newson, for this question. The full representations made as part of the deposit consultation will be made available in full to the appointed independent planning inspector. However, due to the number and length of representations submitted, it is necessary to summarise them as part of the actual report. And I think this is similar to the question I answered earlier.
Thank you. Question number 5 will be read by Mr. Vincent in the public gallery. No, sorry, Mrs. Vincent.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I've got a froggy voice at the moment. Question. In the light of Wales being the most nature-depleted country in the world, quote unquote, from the Tir Natur website, why did the Vale RLDP not fully address options for housing development on the remaining brownfield sites in Bury, instead of making incursion into well-established green wedge farmland at the fringes of town?
Thank you, Mrs. Vincent, for that question. As part of the RLDP process, 2 calls for candidate sites were undertaken, enabling landowners to submit sites for potential inclusion as allocations in the plan. Each of those sites has been subject to a robust assessment to determine its suitability and, more importantly, its deliverability for housing. So as a result of the candidate site assessment process, some brownfield sites have been allocated for housing. However, following the development of the Bury waterfront during the previous plan period, there are now, very few large brownfield sites remaining in Bury. The council has also undertaken an urban capacity study to identify opportunities on previously developed and underutilised land within the Bury settlement boundary. In addition, an allowance for completions on unallocated, unallocated windfall sites has been factored into the plan. This standing this apart, given the significant need for new housing in Bury, including affordable housing on deliverable sites, there has been a need to consider greenfield sites. This position is fully explained in the RLDP evidence base. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Sivignon. Could you now please answer question number 6?
I should just keep my mic on. This is about RLDP planning meetings. It's anticipated that a report on the RLDP will be presented to Cabinet and the Place Scrutiny Committee in November 2026, followed by full council in December 2026, seeking approval to submit the RLDP for independent examination. It's important to note that scrutiny, as we all know, is not a formal decision-making committee, but a space to provide challenge and viewpoints on an apolitical basis ahead of any decisions being made. During Place Scrutiny Committee, a range of members will consider the plan, with committee members agreeing recommendations that will help inform the longer-term decision-making process ahead of all members discussing and voting on the issue at full council.
Thank you. The next question, question number 7, is from Catherine Hart. Over to you, Councillor Sivignon.
Thank you, Maxine Levett, for your question. The Vale of Glamorgan...
Not that one, sorry. Councillor Hart. Sorry,
Oh,
It's number 7. We're on
sorry,
Catherine
I missed
Hart.
the question. I apologise. Thank you, Catherine Hart. Impact on property value is not generally a material planning consideration. This is a well-established principle, as planning policies and appeal decisions make clear that land and house prices are outside the planning system.
Thank you. Now question number 8 from Maxine Levett.
Thank you, Maxine Levett, for this question. The Vale of Glamorgan, including St Athan, is identified within the National Growth Area in Future Wales, the National Plan 2040. At the local level, the RLDP strategy defines a strategic growth area which encompasses the main centres of population in the Vale, with St Athan being referenced as a sustainable location where new residential development can be aligned with other uses where there are current and proposed sustainable transport options to reduce the need to travel by car. St Athan is identified as a primary settlement within the strategic growth area, and it is considered that the level of growth proposed is appropriate given its strategic location and its close proximity to 2 key employment sites.
Thank you. The next question is on sewage infrastructure improvements from Julia Thompson.
Thank you, Julia Thompson, for this question. In preparing the deposit RLDP, the Council has consulted Welsh Water to identify sewerage capacity on a site-specific basis. So Welsh Water have a programme of capital investment, which is set out in their asset management plan over their next programme period. And over their next programme period, improvements have been identified to specific wastewater treatment work serving the Vale. Where there is a need for improvements to take place prior to development, or where additional hydraulic modelling work is necessary, this is set out within the infrastructure delivery plan, which is prepared as part of the evidence base for the RLDP. So Welsh Water will also be consulted again as a standard on all relevant planning applications.
Thank you. Question number 10 is from Stephen Fraser.
Thank you, Stephen Fraser, for this question. Cardiff Airport and the emergency services were consulted on the deposit RLDP and did not raise any objections to the plan.
And question number 11 from Emma Reid.
Thank you, Emma Reid, for this question. The approved RLDP delivery agreement indicates that the political reporting for the next stage of the RLDP process should take place around October, November this year. This report will include the report of consultation on representations made to the deposit RLDP and will seek approval, obviously, to submit the RLDP to Welsh Government for independent examination. It's anticipated that the report will be considered by Cabinet and Scrutiny Committee in November of this year and by full Council, hopefully by early December this year.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sivanianam. Question number 12 is to the leader, Liz Burnett.
Diolch, and diolch, Mr Clarke. The Council has repeatedly sought to protect Barry and the Vales communities from an unauthorised development at the site of the biomass plant, and that involved taking enforcement action in the most robust of terms possible. The award of costs hinged on a technical matter relating to the proposed enforcement, a matter which could easily have or reasonably been accommodated by an amendment to the notice. It was a highly regrettable decision of Planning and Environment Decisions Wales to determine the matter in the way they did, one which left the Council unjustly facing a costs award. I do not consider it an appropriate use of resources to revisit that matter in the manner requested, given the reasons already stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Next question is to Councillor Bronwyn Brooks from Emma Reid.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Emma Reid, for the question. In March 2026, Transport for Wales reaffirmed their aim of delivering timetable improvements to achieve 2 trains per hour for customers travelling between Bridgend and Cardiff on the Vale of Glamorgan line. TfW have confirmed that significant progress has been made in delivering the infrastructure and fleet changes required. This has included the completion of the electrification of the Upper Rumney line, and work is progressing to secure the necessary permissions to introduce the Class 756 tri-mode trains on the line. TfW have confirmed that they require the Class 756 trains to be running reliably before increasing to a full timetable of 2 trains an hour. And in introducing those new Class 756 trains on the Vale line, TfW is working closely with Network Vale and the Vale of Glamorgan to resolve rail operational requirements around existing level crossings. Any material change that impacts either the usage of a level crossing by the public or the frequency of train movements must satisfy a robust level crossing risk assessment process, and that's undertaken by National Rail. TfW currently anticipates that, subject to resolving both the outstanding rolling stock and level crossing matters, that the enhanced timetable will be introduced from 2027. And then, in line with buses, the council is due to go to tender for the three rural Vale services. The V1, so that's the Llantwit Major to Bridgend via Llanmaes, Sigynstone, Llandow, Llanbleddion, Cowbridge, Penllyn, Craig, Penllyn, Colwinston, Corntown and UNE. The V2, which is Llantwit Major to Bridgend via Boverton, St Athan, St Mary Church, St Hilary, Penllyn, Craig Penllyn, Ferngoch, Llangan and Troyes. And also then the V3, which is the Cowbridge to Barry via Welsh St Donets, Tyronnid, Llantrithid, Llancarvan, Llancadle, Penmark, Fonmon and Rhys. Now, the timetables are set for Monday to Saturday services with between 4 and 5 services running in each direction per day. So that's a total of 8 to 10 services daily. Operators will also be given, as part of the tender, the opportunity to submit their own timetables for consideration. So once the tender results are received and assessed, consideration will be given to allocation of the 535,000 funding, which is what we allocated at, when we set the council tax budget. The tender is currently with the council's procurement body, Ardal, who are undertaking final checks before it goes live, and that's envisaged that will happen this month. Once tender results are received, consideration will also be given to the need to run an enhanced G1 service with green links, as residents would have a regular bus services based on the tender timetables, and also increasing frequency on the 320 service and adding an additional bus into the 303, 304 X2 loop. That's the bus that sort of goes around that big loop. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Moving on to agenda item 7. Six. Amendments to the Constitution. Leader, can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. The amendment to Council's Constitution is a regular item on the Council's agenda. And in this, we actually review the Constitution on an ongoing basis. The changes to the Constitution are laid out in section 4, which include the removal of discretionary housing pay review committee, because that hasn't met for over 7 years, and there are alternative ways of dealing with it. Removal of trust committee, and actually the council no longer holds anything in trust except for assets which fall within the responsibility of Welsh Church Act. Amendment to the Glamorgan Heritage Coast Advisory Group. This caused consternation. Some people thought it meant it was cancelling it. No, it's not. It's removing the twice yearly arrangement. In fact, they could now meet as often as they want at a time that is convenient. So seemed overcomplication. 4.5 is the removal of Central South Consortium Joint Education Service Joint Committee. That's because the Central South Consortium ceased in August 25. Amendment to Big Fresh Catering Company in relation to terms of reference and information on the company's community benefit and wider service outcomes. And finally, the removal of Scrutiny Performance Panel. That's being removed for clarity's sake, as it's not formally constituted. So all it's for us today is to approve the changes to the Constitution as laid out. So that's the amendments to the Council's Constitution as detailed in paragraphs 4.2 to 4.7 of the report be approved by full Council, and that the Constitution be updated accordingly. And I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
I don't see any hands raised, so the recommendation is approved. Moving on to agenda item 7, a review of the statement of licensing policy, which is a 5-yearly thing, and it's been referred from licensing committee for decision and shared with members in advance. Councillor Sivanyanam, could you present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm asking Council this evening to approve this statement of the licensing policy for 2026 to 2031. Some members will be aware that this is something that we're required to do every 5 years, and I can tell members today that the only amendment we've made to this statement of licensing policy is to incorporate a requirement of the Home Office, which is that when we can make decisions, when we make decisions on licensing, that we consider the local economy. So we have done that. And just as a sort of an aside, we had 2 responses to the consultation on this from Alcohol UK and the Health Board, both of which we have accepted. And they were broadly around the fact that alcoholism, alcohol consumption is related to health inequalities, and that, our policy should reflect that. So I would ask Council to approve it.
Again, I can't see anyone with a hand raised, so I'll assume the recommendation is approved. Agenda item 8, well, we'll take 8 to 10 together as one block. So it's just to inform the Council of the use of the urgent decision procedure under Article 15.14 of the Constitution. Is Council happy to move the use of the urgent decision procedures 8 to 10 en bloc? The floor is yours, okay. Councillor Haines.
9. This is to do with item 9. I welcome the opportunity to support the acceptance of this local growth fund allocation. It is encouraging to see investment focused on improving productivity, creating better jobs, and investing in strategic infrastructure across Wales. The report makes clear that one of the fund's key priorities is improving transport connectivity to support employment and economic growth. It also highlights the importance of unlocking strategic sites and ensuring the infrastructure keeps pace with investment. In the Vale of Glamorgan, few places better illustrate that ambition than Athan and Aberthaw Energy Park. These are nationally significant employment and innovation sites with enormous potential to attract further investment and create high-quality jobs. However, their future success depends not only on the businesses located there, but also on people being able to access them easily by public transport. That is why I'd like to ask the Cabinet member how much of the Vale Glamorgan £3.63 million local government fund allocation is proposed to be invested in improving public transport serving St Athan, and specifically, is any funding being earmarked to progress the long-standing ambition of delivering a railway station to St Athan to better connect these major employment centres with the wider region? If the answer is that individual projects have not...
Sorry, Councillor Haines, I'm going to have to ask Councillor Johnson if he's got a point of order.
It's just a brief point of order, Mayor. I was under the impression that the section of the agenda for the use of the urgent decision procedure was to note that Cabinet had used the urgent decision procedure, and that was all that happened at this point in the meeting, rather than a chance to discuss each of those individually. I'm happy to discuss it if these matters have changed, but if they haven't changed, then I'm sure the Councillor who's been here for 4 years would be aware of the procedure here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, nothing's changed. We're just going to accept the urgent decision procedures en bloc, regardless, I'm afraid, Councillor Haines, but thank you for your contribution.
Well, thank you for, let me speak for a moment, Mayor.
Just for information, if it helps, on these reports, there isn't normally any debate on them because they're matters that have already passed. So they're in the past. They can't be overturned tonight. But Councillor Haines, if you have any specific questions relating to the report, more than happy for you to write to me or ask a council question at the next council meeting. But if you want to get in touch with me before then, I'm quite happy to come back to you with any information that you're asking for. Thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Just on a point of order, Madam Mayor, I accept the comments that have been made regarding the fact that the use of urgent decision procedures is a matter for noting at full council. I'd just like clarification as to whether, if members had any objections to the use of the urgent decision procedure, would they be able to register those objections in the meeting through the form of an oral contribution?
No, I, from my perspective, from a constitutional perspective, those matters have gone. So, as I say, I'd be more than happy to take any questions if you wanted to contact me separately. But we allowed Councillor Haines to speak because we didn't know where he was going with it. When it became clear that he was going to ask an actual question, the appropriate place to ask a question is in actual council questions, which should have been done before this evening and then submitted formally in writing, and it would have been answered as part of this agenda. And I would say the same would apply, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you for clarifying. I think the time for asking questions has passed. So we'll move on to agenda item 11. Motion, first motion of the evening, submitted by Councillor Burnett. So, Leader, could you present your motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the motion relates to the receipt of a one-off amount of 322, it's actually a little bit more now, consequential funding by Welsh Government relating to additional special needs and disabilities, or as it's known in England, SEND, spending in England. The existence of this funding has actually been known since the end of March. I actually was in a meeting when it was discussed in a cross-party meeting on the 23rd of March. It missed the deadline for this year's budget, but it has been widely understood. I think what's been, the motion lays the facts out as is. I think what I've actually found particularly disappointing, and I have made my thoughts known to various cabinet members, Welsh Government cabinet ministers, that I was disappointed by the First Minister's response to questions in related to this, and saying that it was different in Wales, and it's not. The funding mechanism, funding education in England, may be different. They have a lot of academy schools, sometimes there's direct funding. The deficit is definitely not different. And if you look at the evidence from Welsh Local Government Association, IFS, various education finance specialists, it's actually felt that the scope of the problem might even be larger. in Wales. The debt write-off over many years, if undealt with in England, was felt to mean that if it wasn't dealt with, 8 out of 10 local authorities in England would have been bankrupt. Wales local authorities coped, but the question is, what did that mean for us? It meant education pressures. It meant that we were using funds that we actually could have used for other areas in education because we prioritised education. And it meant that other services were hollowed out, the type of things that we've had many debates over. There is widespread support for this view. The Welsh Local Government Association has cross-party support. The School Social Partnership supports this. The Association of Directors of Education Wales are in support. And if you have a look at Senedd petitions, there is actually currently a petition by NAHT that's now well over 10,000 signatures, which means there will be a debate on it probably in the autumn. I feel this is something that this council needs to make a stand on. We need to say that this funding needs to go to children via local authorities in Wales. In moving this, I would ask for a recorded vote, but I would move, Mayor.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Birch.
Thank you. I would like to second this motion. I'd start by saying it's disappointing that the argument for special needs or additional learning needs funding has to be repeated so often. There are those here who will claim that people, and young people in particular, are overdiagnosed, when in fact we're now recognising the difficulties that many children and young people have that mean that access to a meaningful education is more difficult for them and may lead to them turning up as NEETs later down the line when we have to deal with a different set of problems. In the past, many young people would simply not have been catered for, leading to disengagement and isolation, or they would be educated in highly segregated provisions, possibly even boarding schools, which separated them from their communities and did not equip them from the outside world. We'll all remember, particularly those of us who were older, people who simply did not fit in at school. They were uncomfortable, they were poorly behaved, they were dysregulated, they would say now. They mitched, they were disruptive, and very often they would leave school early or drift off and we never saw them again. And some of them would turn out to be more successful in later life, able to gain educational qualifications outside the restrictive jacket that traditional education would place on them. We've all seen that. And because of that, in order to address that and not return to that situation, in the Vale, we have a wide spread of different types of provision. We have Ysgol which you will all be familiar with from the television, which has led to the numbers going up there. People move into the Vale in order to be able to access the education there. And in fact, I know of a deputy head teacher from Cardiff who has moved into the Vale specifically so that her child can go to Ysgol because she feels that the school provision in Cardiff is not what she would want for her child. We also have the old St Barrack site, apart from the Penarth site. We have the new site that's coming on in Cosmiston. We have Ysgol Newydd, which is for EBSD children. So we have a variety of ways of addressing children's needs. We have 9 local authority resource bases across the Vale. All sorts of provisions are offered. There is the hearing support unit in Cogan Primary, which I visit regularly as it's in my ward. We have physical and medical needs at Palmerston Primary. We have an anxiety and ASC unit in Ysgol Gwaun and Nant. Complex needs at Jenner Park Primary. I won't go through the entire list. There are secondary school provisions in place as well. More hearing support, graduating on from Cogan in St Sires in Penarth. There's an ASC base in Whitmore High, which I think some of you've probably been to. There's physical and medical needs at St Sires, traditionally, of course, because there used to be a special needs school there. There's satellite bases all over the place. And we have so many different specialist provisions in order to make sure that these children can remain within education, that it is catered for, their needs are catered for, And for many of them, they can be in bases that mean they only spend a couple of days there a week, and the rest of the time they are in their home school, so that they're not disengaging from the children that they should be growing up and sharing the educational experience with. We've been told about the money that was set aside but has not yet been awarded to local authorities. Our school reserves do not have sufficient headroom to accommodate the increase in special needs that happens year on year. The NAHT and ASCL, Association of School and College Leaders, have written to Anna Brachan saying that they continue to report increasing demand, growing complexity of need, unsustainable workload pressures, significant challenges in maintaining appropriate levels of provision due to the financial constraints. We all recognise this. Most of us are on boards of governors that are tackling school deficits, and ALN, as you will know, is a major pressure in those deficits. I can see people nodding around the room, regardless of what party we come from. We all recognise that. Education is the highest standing department in the Vale Council, though you wouldn't believe it. Most of our questions are about bins. And that's what most people are interested in, grass cutting and bins, isn't it? They trust us, largely, to look after their children. They don't need to ask questions about it. But now, this is very important. We need to be thinking about this. And that's not necessarily taking party political lines on it, though I'm sure we will. And it's important, as councillors, as elected representatives of all sorts of people out there, even those that didn't vote for us, to ensure that all of our children...
Sorry, Councillor Birch, could you draw your speech to a close now?
Oh, I was enjoying myself.
Thank you.
All our children and young people have a rich and varied educational experience which is appropriate to their level of learning ability. Not everyone will have a family member who is affected by ALN issues, but everyone here represents families and constituents who face these issues. So we need to use our position and our power this evening to promote this call for proper funding to be returned to us.
Thank you. So the debate is open now. I've already seen that Councillor Payne wants to speak. Councillor Johnson, you'll be after that. Councillor Carroll after that. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking in support of this motion as a practitioner who has worked in both England and Wales, running a centre for people with additional learning needs in London and for the People First movement in Wales, as well as understanding the impact of unmet needs in ALN and homelessness as a manager for Llamai in Bridgend and the Vale of Glamorgan. So I feel suitably qualified and experienced to speak in support of this motion. Young people with ALN are at greater risk of homelessness than their peers. We already know that the biggest pull on the education budget is the demand for ALN support. Without appropriate support through our education and the transition to adulthood, many face barriers to employment, independent living and stable housing. Adequately funding ALN services is therefore not only an investment in children's education, but also in preventing homelessness, poor mental health and reducing the future costs to public services. Failure to provide council with the consequential funding for ALN is not just a funding issue, it's also an equality issue. Women continue to undertake the majority of unpaid caring responsibility. When ALN support is underfunded, it is too often mothers and other female carers who are forced to fill the gaps, affecting their employment, income and well-being. Adequate funding is therefore essential not only for children and for children with additional needs, but for advancing gender equality. And also as somebody who is currently undergoing the task and finish in terms of, you know, the impact on budgets and spending, I also was part of the task and finish that looked at our 10 ALN bases, and the feedback from all party groups and all feedback that the quality of our ALN provision in the Vale of Glamorgan is exemplary. So I am fully in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. So Councillor Johnson, Nessa.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I welcome the opportunity to discuss the additional budget of the new Welsh Government for additional learning needs. It has been 2 months since the Senedd elections, and tonight's meeting is the first proper meeting of the Council since then. Labour is now the shadow party in the Senedd and obviously finds it difficult dealing with the change. I listen to people who worry about the situation after 27 years in power. The proposal is already undermines and is willing to accept less than a third of the funding suggested in the proposal. Essentially, the proposal is an example of do as I say, not as I do. Labour was in power in the Senedd for 27 years. Now, you know how the Barnett formula works. England needs spending, and we in Wales receive a percentage for our own needs, as the Labour Party did 2 years ago when childcare funding in England was allocated differently in Wales. Of course, I agree with the need to address ALN funding problems, but your party voted with Reform and the Conservatives against fair funding for Wales just last week in the Senedd chamber. Again, a decision that undermines your viewpoint on the proposal. The minority Plaid Cymru government was formed 2 months ago. We understand there's a need to work with other innovative parties for legislation and financial matters, as did we as a constructive opposition in the past. Labour deliberately established a Senedd that needs cooperation in order to succeed, but at its first opportunity, Labour has already voted against additional money for innovative cases and is working with right-wing parties to oppose, thereby putting money at risk. We heard yesterday 100 million laugh, yes, but tonight Plaid Cymru has announced 120. 80 million for ALN, as well as 145 for the NHS, 55 million for childcare, and 15 million to extend free school meals. Do you now oppose these because this is your viewpoint tonight? The political landscape changes all the time, but Labour needs to realise they're no longer in power, and support for them is slipping away. Some local recent results. Iltyd's by-election last year, Labour came fourth. Bridgend Vale Glamorgan parliamentary election, Cardiff Penarth parliamentary election, Barrack by-election last week. They became fourth in all those cases. They are Labour now, but who knows what will happen next year. This discussion clearly shows Labour's failure in this area after being in power for 27 years. Recently, I rejoined the Audit and Governance Committee following a 4-year break since 2022. ALN is at the top of the risks register, the highest risk possible. This has increased significantly since the current leaders took the council in 2022 and following a period when Labour led on all levels of governance. Mayor, Labour members in the Senedd and this council were happy to receive budget money in March under the Labour government, but are now unhappy when more money was proposed by a Plaid Cymru government, and this is why the proposal before us tonight is one in bad faith. It is no surprise, Mayor, to anyone that I would like to present an amendment. If you are willing to receive this, I would like to include a new bullet point at the start saying the following. And to change the current point 2 to I believe those 2 points are more reasonable than Labour suggestion, which undermines delusion and is unrealistic. As the leader said, I would also like to record individuals' vote on this amendment. I'm happy to repeat those amendments if necessary. Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
to the motion, please, and we'll all pay attention.
I'm very sorry to interrupt. Apparently people at home are not hearing the translation properly. They can't, they didn't hear what Councillor Johnson said.
I think if Councillor Johnson would read his amendment in English now, then we'll be able to proceed.
Thank you.
I can repeat it in English. So a new point 1 after that this council resolves to, which is that this council resolves to support efforts to improve the fiscal arrangements within Welsh Government, within which Welsh Government, and at the current point 2, the current bullet point 2 there, that is amended to read, requests that the Leader of the Council writes to the First Minister welcoming the proposal for £120 million additional ALN funding compared with the previously agreed budget. I'm sure I'll have somebody to second that. Thank you.
Right, so we're now discussing the amendment. No, it's not an amendment. Oh, sorry.
It's a different topic. Do you want me to explain?
Yes, please. I'm afraid your proposed changes are too significant.
Yeah, from my perspective, and I've just conferred with the monitoring officer, the additional line you want to put in at the start around the Barnett formula and the fiscal arrangements.
Dwi'n hapus I dyn.
I am happy to resend this if it's more convenient. I was going to point it out.
Oh, sorry.
The problem with the second amendment is that it's new information that wasn't available when this motion was proposed. But that would be something if Councillor Burnett, who moved the motion, if she were willing to but the motion to add a point regarding the Barnett formula is completely different to what's being discussed here, in my opinion.
At home, the first change suggested by Councillor Johnson is too significant, so he's agreed to withdraw that proposed change. The second part of his suggestion, basically, I think if our leader, Councillor Burnett, is happy for that amendment to be debated, then we can do that as part of the amendment. As part of the motion, obviously. Well, as an amendment to the original motion. Yeah?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it would have to be debated as an amendment. I'm not happy to accept it. There is no evidence of that. There was time for that to be given to me with that evidence. Therefore, I cannot accept that. I am not aware of those proposals, and 120 million is a bit short of 300, isn't it?
So I'm told we're still debating the original motion, unamended. Yeah, please.
Yeah, the situation is, I think Councillor Johnson, given that the original person who presented this motion is unwilling to change, as you've suggested, the matter is for you whether you want to put forward that as an actual amendment, in which case, if that amendment is seconded, we move to debate that amendment rather than the original motion. If you don't want to do that, we'll continue debating the motion as put forward.
Diolch yn fawr, Rob. So, I gadarnhau.
So to confirm, you're asking if I'm proposing this as an amendment, and if someone seconds it, that we would then debate the amendment and then come back to the proposer or the motion, possibly amended for further discussion. Yes, that's what I'd say. So in that case, could I please propose to amend the second point? I will do it in English.
And I just stop you over now. That's fine.
I'll stop there if that's okay.
No, watch the BBC.
Okay, so we're now debating that. So I've got a list of people who wanted to speak on the original motion. If you no longer want to speak on the original motion, on the amendment, as just proposed by Councillor Johnson, obviously we'll move through the list a bit more quickly. But the next person on my list is Councillor Carroll.
Before speaking, could I, sorry.
I'll pause there just so that I can read out again exactly what Councillor Johnson's amendment is, so that members are aware of exactly what we're discussing. So it's the motion as before you on the papers, word for word, with the exception of an additional bullet point 3 to the council therefore resolves to, and that reads that the leader writes to the Welsh Government First Minister to welcome the £120 million of additional ALN funding. And then bullet points 3 and 4 become bullet points 4 and 5. Am I correct, Councillor Johnson?
Not quite. I mean, it's removing the second bullet point. The council therefore resolves to request the Commerce Council writes to the First Minister. So that point there becomes request that the leader of the council writes to the First Minister welcoming the £120 million.
So it's replacing bullet point 2 with a new bullet point 2.
Yes.
And that's been seconded by Councillor Shirley Hodges. Would you like to speak, Councillor Carroll?
Before I begin, Madam Mayor, could I clarify as to whether I'm speaking to the amendment or to the original motion?
To the amendment.
Okay, well, I shall speak to the amendment, but I reserve my right to speak to the original motion as well.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I don't accept the proposed amendment by the Plaid Cymru group. The reason for that is quite simple. If £340 million has been provided by Westminster to ministers in the Senedd for a specific purpose, in this case ALN funding, my belief is that that money in its entirety should be allocated for that purpose. The danger of not doing so is that it will create an asymmetry within the system, which will result in schools in the Vale of Glamorgan and across Wales being unable to meet their funding pressures. As a result, our group shall be voting against the amendment and we shall be supporting the motion as is written.
Thank you. The next person on my list is Councillor Gwyn John, but again, if you'd rather not speak on the amendment and wait and speak later on the original motion, if that's how things pan out, then that's fine. But Councillor Gwyn John, are you ready to speak or not?
Thank you, Mayor. I support the original amendment and I support what Councillor Carroll has just said. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Shirley Hodges, I think you jumped the queue now.
I did. I must apologise for jumping the queue. It's my first time, so you must forgive me. I've been a councillor for 4 days, but I have been watching these committee meetings for 30 years. And I can spot politics when I see it. And I can spot when things are not genuine debate, they are politicking. And I think we're in the middle of that. I think at the end of the day, having watched all those debates over decades about the underfunding of the Vale, and that not being addressed by the Labour Party, I think it's a little bit cheeky to come today to poke for a fight when really fundamentally the children of the Vale should be foremost and first. And I don't think this debate is realistic. It's just looking for a political fight. So I'm supporting Councillor Ian Johnson in what he says, and I'm supporting him giving you up-to-date information, not fantasy figures in your motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. The next person on my list is Councillor Asprey. Do you still wish to speak to the amendment?
Could I speak later on?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
On the motion.
So, Councillor Perks, same question.
Can I speak later on, please, to the original motion?
Councillor Ewan Goodjohn.
Could I speak on the motion, please?
Councillor Fisher, at home or elsewhere?
No.
Okay, Councillor Mark Wilson, I know, wants to speak on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. My real concern here with these new figures is they're new figures. I've got no evidence that these figures actually exist. And obviously, the figures are insufficient for our needs. And my concern is these figures will be divided amongst 22 local authorities, not just for Vale Glamorgan. If you say we've got an additional 120 million for Vale Glamorgan, we'd be having a party, wouldn't we? But no, it's not. It's amongst 22 local authorities, and it doesn't go near enough. So I'll be voting against the amendment.
Councillor Burnett, I think, wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. It was suggested that I check BBC. I have 120 over 3 years. It's 40 million a year. We knew that there was 40 million on the table. Actually, in 28, 29, there's another 198 million of consequentials, and we'll be coming after that as well. So 120 pulled out of the bag at the last minute. I'm sorry, it doesn't do it. I will have to vote against this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, pulled out of the bag at the last minute. You've never, obviously, Leader, been involved in budget negotiations. The money is Barnett consequentials, which are awarded due to the failure of funding over many years in England. They have been given to Wales as part of the Barnett formula. And basically, as you are all fully aware, I hope, that money is given under devolution and hypothecated, and it comes to the Welsh Government to decide what to do with it. Now, as much as I would love to give all the money to ALN, I'd also like to give all the money to the NHS. Can't do both. Both have been underfunded. Both have been underfunded consistently by Welsh Government, which was run until 2 months ago by your party. This is politicking, as my colleague, Councillor Shirley Hodges, said, and the decision will be voted on tomorrow. You're a bit late with this, I'm afraid.
So do you support the amendment, Councillor Hodges? Thank you. Thank you. If nobody else wants to speak on the amendment, we can move to a vote. Councillor Johnson.
Just to confirm, can we have a recorded vote on this?
You may, yes, of course.
Okay, the vote is already set up. So just to remind members, you're voting in favour of or against, or you're abstaining on the amendment to the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Dodd is yet to vote. Is he here remotely? Councillor Dodd, can you hear me? You haven't voted, if you can hear me. Now's your chance. Missed your chance, I'm afraid.
All votes are in, so if you were to display the votes. So that amendment fails. So members are now invited to discuss the substantive motion as put forward. We're doing now is we're going back to the original motion as in your papers, unchanged.
Yeah. Councillor Carroll again, I think. Yes, sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As I indicated in my comments to the amendment, I shall be supporting the motion brought forward by Councillors Burnett and Birch, and I thank them for tabling it. This motion is being discussed against a backlog of serious school funding pressures facing the education sector across the Vale of Glamorgan. As I declared at the start of the meeting, I'm a school governor. I recognise the pressures that head teachers are under in setting their budgets, and so it's important that any monies provided to Senate ministers by the Westminster government for the purposes of education funding are passed on accordingly. And I don't mean passed on to this council, I mean passed on to schools, because that's where ultimately the money needs to go. It's important to recognise that the school funding that the Vale of Glamorgan Council currently receives is set by a formula that was determined back in 1991, which is the year before I was born, to put into context. So we're not just talking about existing pupils. There are members of this chamber who weren't alive when those figures were established, and it's important to recognise that context. Now, there has long been an issue in Wales through the devolution settlement that we have, whereby monies have been passed on to the Welsh Government for a specific purpose, and those monies have not been ring-fenced and spent accordingly. There has too long been a desire to do things differently for the sake of it, rather than with regard to outcomes. If we look at education in Wales, a fifth of pupils left primary school unable to read, thanks to a decision not to implement the phonics system of teaching in schools. The discredited queuing method was used for many years, contrary to the advice of experts. Now, I will acknowledge there are problems with existing ALN frameworks. There are budgetary pressures. These frameworks are set at a level higher than this council. And it's important for us to recognise that when schools and local authorities make funding decisions, they have to follow the law as it is. So if there are statutory requirements that the school or the authority must follow, then obviously it needs appropriate resources and monies to be able to do so. As long as the system remains unreformed, then clearly the monies must be passed on in full to enable the local authority and the schools in question to meet the budgetary pressures that they face. So, of course, our schools must be provided with the resources to be able to provide the sufficient ALN provision that's required. We know that Vale schools are underfunded. We know that this is as a result of a decision that's taken in the Senedd rather than in this authority. There are many things with which I disagree with this administration on. I do acknowledge, however, that for many years the Vale of Glamorgan Council has funded education at a level above the indicator-based assessments that were used to determine the Vale of Glamorgan's block grant. So clearly it's important that a message is sent on this, that the money must be passed on because our schools need it, and as such I shall be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Gwyn John, next.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm certainly supporting the motion. I think we've done exceptionally well through the years in increasing our ALN facilities, and I supported the one that's built in Lantford Major Comprehensive School only recently. Quite honestly, going back down the years, I remember parents in Lantford Major coming to me where they had to take their children to Penarth. And this has grown immensely over the years, and we desperately need this money, and I support it fully, and I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. Councillor Asprey.
Thank you for the chance to speak on this. I am a Plaid Cymru member of the Council Startwell Committee and was part of the Task and Finish group, which reported its findings on additional learning needs resource bases earlier this year. It is a little disappointing that the motion here today does not recognise the excellent work put in by members to understand and explain the challenges around ALN in the Vale. An evidence-led approach is so much more useful in tackling these issues. While nobody will argue against investing more money into ALN, which is something that Welsh government has promised another £80 million over the next 2 years, there is a need to tackle structural issues in the system, as shown by our report. That final report identified 6 systemic gaps, not least of which is around responsibilities for funding. And should this be done by school budgets or the NHS? There were also issues around sustainability of a system built on short-term grants, inconsistent staffing ratios, transport entitlement, parental concerns, and the understanding of ALN processes. All of this, of course, under the previous Labour government in Cardiff and Cabinet here in the Vale. These long-term issues require proper resolution and not just one-off quick fixes to make up for existing problems in the system. Mayor, I would welcome having a proper debate around delivery of ALN policy based on our report and how it affects our pupils and parents. In the meantime, we should be welcoming the additional investment promised by the now Plaid Cymru government in the Senedd, which is more than previously planned for this year, and argue for fair and transparent funding formula for Wales. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Councillor Asprey. Councillor Perks is next on the list, I think.
Thank you, Mayor. What I wanted to say was, you know, we've been promised over 300 million for additional learning needs, consequentials to come down. And what we have to remember in all of this, people are saying it's politicking. There's actually children involved in this. They get one chance at education. If you've got a child with extra additional needs, one of my children had additional needs, but only needed the support from moving from primary to secondary education. But if you've got a child who does need those additional learning needs met by the provision, then that child has one chance of an education, but which also then reflects on the rest of their life chances. So to say that 120 million is okay to actually give 22 local authorities is absolutely ridiculous when there's 320 odd there. You know, if we need to fight for, you know, you need to go and fight for money from somewhere else, which is what the leader of Plaid Cymru said he's going to do, then I suggest he goes and does that. But with this consequential money, I think it needs to be given to the children who only get this time to be in school. That's all I wanted to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Councillor Ewan Goodjohn.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me take the politics out of this and let me make very clear to the Plaid Cymru group here today that I will always respect devolution, that we would never expect the Welsh Government to purely do what the English Government does, the Westminster Government does. I will never oppose fair funding for Wales. I will never oppose a reform of the Barnett formula that was working for all nations and regions in the United Kingdom. However, once we clear politics away from this, I have to ask the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru as a whole not to fail young people. And there are three things on a personal level that I think the Welsh Government need to reconsider. Firstly, free school meals in secondary schools. The rollout being only equal to that of England, I think, is a national disgrace. We have led the way under a Labour administration previously in extending free school meals to as many children as we possibly can and improving the quality of those meals. And the fact that there are young people that are going hungry in our secondary schools is an absolute disgrace. Secondly, the motion here today on ALN funding, the love, the support, the care and the passion that every single person, every single member of staff in those ALN resource bases in Ysgol-y-Derry and every special school across Wales absolutely filled my heart every time I see it. There are young people that are being supported that they never would have been supported before, including myself as someone who was a student with ALN in England who was failed by their primary school. I think that the idea that we do not properly fund these spaces would be an absolute failure of a government so early on in its reign in power. And finally, I think that it needs to be acknowledged by every single one of us that young people is the heart of our communities. If we fail young people, we'll have failed every single person growing up in the Vale of Glamorgan. £40 million a year does not cut it, and you cannot talk your way around it. If there is 300 million given to every single person in Wales, please let there be proper priority for additional learning needs. Schools are in a budgetary crisis. And today we heard from the Education Minister in Wales that they would not be getting a full independent pay review accepted pay rise next year. They would be getting 0.75% less as far as the consultation that's been released. Well, that's hundreds of pounds, up to thousands of pounds for some of our teachers, lost from our communities, lost from the hardest working people in our Vale, in the whole Vale of Glamorgan. And please, do not fail young people. Do not let them be at risk of a lack of care due to lack of staff, lack of ALN funding, or even the dangerous potential of industrial action and strikes in our schools. Please, Plaid Cymru, and please, the Welsh Government, please, properly fund young people and please support us.
Diolch, Councillor Goodjohn. I think it's the mover's right to reply now. Councillor Burnett.
Diolch, Mayor. Some interesting contributions. It is a complex case. It is, we can talk about Barnett formula and funding and all that sort of thing. Yes, if we look at the overall budget settlement every year, it is an overall pot that comes from England, Barnett formula applied. If it's additional funding, as this was SEND funding in England, it specifically relates to SEND. And SEND is the equivalent of our ALN. So there is a question in terms of that. I think we have to recognise that as in terms of in terms of ALN, the legislation means that we are responsible for children up to 25 years old. We know that there's much greater need. Those needs are more complex. We know that ALN is not what an awful lot of people would think of traditionally as additional learning needs, but we're talking about social, emotional, behavioural and mental health challenges facing those young people who could be blighted for the rest of their lives. We know, we've heard, that those young people end up being more likely to be homeless, more likely to have ongoing mental health issues, more likely, I mean, we historically used to talk about adverse childhood experiences. You couldn't get a lot worse, could you? So we've heard tonight that we're playing politics. Well, actually, I'm the education spokesperson for Welsh Local Government Association. I live and breathe this. I'm also a finance spokesperson for the Welsh Local Government Association. I was also fluid for 2 years. And do you know what? We work together. We work together, cross parties, because we believe in local government. And what I can say is that the proposal, and if anybody would like to sit down with me, I can go through all the reports with you and all the evidence. This wasn't just picked out of the air. This is what Welsh Local Government Association feel is appropriate. We went through all of these and we agreed that this was the stance to take. But what I will say, if we have shared values, if we care about the same things, and I cannot walk away from the fact that this actually was caused by austerity in the first place. If anyone wants to ask you what the direct impact of austerity is, show them this, with the impact of over 3.5 million on education in England. Billion, sorry, not 3.5 million. So, you know, I'm no fan, but if it's the right thing to do, I'll do it. And I confirm my support for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can move to the vote. Yeah.
Okay.
Then,
Is
sorry.
the vote ready?
We'll have a break after that.
The vote is ready to go. So it is recorded. That was moved earlier. So it's a recorded vote, and on this occasion, it's either for or against the motion as put forward in your papers. Thank you.
All votes are in, so the motion's been carried. Can I suggest we have a few minutes comfort break? Amser ti bach. Back at 22, please, or say 1:45. Thank you. Please take your seats, ladies. That didn't work.
Use gavel. Golden gavel.
You got to use it.
You only live once, as they say. Right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to resume proceedings, and we have a second motion this evening, submitted by Councillor Lovelock-Edwards and seconded by Councillor Protheroe. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, could you present your motion, please? Oh, Councillor Selby, do you wish to speak or just to say that you're leaving the room?
Hello, yes, just to confirm that I'll leave the meeting, and I'd be grateful if somebody could let me know when I'm able to rejoin. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we happy about how we contact her? Yes, okay. Over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, this motion is a simple ask to help make our systems more transparent and flexible for our residents, particularly those on low incomes and those most in need and at their most vulnerable. I want to share with you some data that some of you may be aware of, but it is worth pointing out nevertheless. In a recent survey conducted by Vale Food Bank, 44% of food bank users reported that they'd been charged by their GP practice to secure a written letter in the last 3 years. 86% of these people were disabled. When asked why they were asking for a GP letter in the first place, 14% of them said that they'd been advised to do so in order to support an issue, such as a housing issue. Currently, other forms of evidence, such as being in receipt of PIP, a letter written by a medical practitioner other than a GP, such as a nurse or a health worker, is not always taken into consideration. The survey showed that the consequences of this is that 57% of food bank users who've had to pay for a GP letter either had to push themselves further into debt or had to go without an essential, such as food, in order to fund the payment. That is because GP practices currently have the ability to enforce these charges, despite having full knowledge that the local authorities only ask for this information as a necessity. Every charge made a discernible difference in their life, having to use the money which should have been used for food or bills. The average charges by a GP practice range from £40 up to one person being charged £150, as these charges are uncapped and unregulated. That is more than a week's shopping and bills combined for many. For someone living on the bottom rate of universal credit, at £96 per week, that leaves no money for the essentials. This, I'm sure we all agree, places a disproportionate burden on our residents at a vulnerable time. So this evening, we can help alleviate some of that anxiety and possibly start a wider discussion with the representatives of GP practices across the Vale. As an authority, we work best when working together to find solutions that help those that we represent. This motion calls for a clear, consistent system that enables all staff and officers to implement and follow, that will create a more effective process of gathering data and evidence, which will in turn should reduce the anxiety on our residents and give them a clearer understanding of what evidence we need to process their application for housing or adaptations and why. As an authority, we recognise that officers are not medical experts. Therefore, the requirement to secure a clearer understanding of how a person's health impacts their everyday life and basic needs is important to ensure that we meet the duty of care and maintain their dignity at a difficult time. We are told by representatives of GP practices in the county that their practices are being swamped by requests for letters and subject access reports. These are time-consuming to prepare and pull GPs away from spending time with their patients. They also feel that they cannot feasibly meet this demand without charging for their time, especially as providing GP letters and fulfilling subject access reports. These requests fall outside the remit expected of them by their NHS contracts. We and other public bodies need to be more flexible and allow other forms of evidence where they are available. Whilst this motion does not solve this wider problem, I hope that in bringing this matter forward, we as an authority can at least implement some changes that help those most in need and lay the foundation for a wider debate on combating health inequalities and raise an awareness of this as a legitimate issue for some of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Protheroe, would you like to speak now? To second the motion at least?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm more than happy to second Councillor Lovelock-Edwards' motion here. As she has stated, we believe that if we could have a simpler and more clarified process across these services, it's going to not just be the right thing to do, but it's going to improve our efficiency and it's going to support our residents at their most vulnerable times. As Councillor Lovelock-Edwards has shared with us, the food bank has borne witness far too frequently to customers coming to them in distress. And so they've gathered evidence on the impact of these GPs charging residents for letters. And because of the advice that they've been given, residents have been led to believe, maybe sometimes they don't need to, we're not always sure, that they have to provide to support their housing applications, sometimes applications for disability claims as well, to help to prove that they have underlying health conditions or disabilities that require this to support adaptations to the homes that they live in or a move to a property that is going to be more suitable to their needs. And if you think residents who are already in need having to find money to support medical evidence in itself will create an unfair barrier. And for people who are already struggling to afford basic necessities, it's in effect punishing them again for being in this position. So this motion, I'm sure, will help us to make clear a system going forward, and it hopefully will open up this wider ethical and moral debate on whether GPs should charge for medical letters to support housing and disability claims to our people when they are in need. Thank you very much.
Diolch, Councillor Protheroe. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion. I just wanted to provide a couple of areas of clarification. That if we're looking at specific adaptations or adjustments and things, actually a GP is probably not the right person to be providing that. A GP can say, oh, this person's got arthritis. A GP can say, this person's got a leg that hurts or something. But actually, it is the skills of an occupational health therapist that can assess what is needed. All too often, people feel that they have to go and get a medical letter, and that's why it needs to be clarified that as an organisation, what we ask for is evidence of need, evidence of what is that adaptation, evidence of what action is needed to be taken on your behalf. So therefore, I do support reviewing actually what our current requirements are so that our staff are comfortable in what they ask for and how they explain what they ask for. I asked quite a few departments, well, what do you ask for? And it is that thing, well, you know, if we're doing disabled facilities adaptations, we actually do our own assessments. We do not require evidence on that. But there are other situations as well. I always find it really saddening when somebody turns up with a sheath of letters because they think that's what's required and they actually do not inform decision making, and I really hope that they have not paid for those. But I think the other thing is this basic guide that explains that what we need is evidence to inform decisions, not proof. And that we will work with residents on that. And I think as a council, we say that we want to be the best we can. This will take us to some way towards that, where we can have a clear conversation with residents about how we can make those decisions, but also that as we work, say with the PSB and people like that, that we can work with the, we can talk to the local medical condition to explain that approach, to explain that actually they don't need to be writing those and therefore they don't need to be charging patients. There are other forms. So if we can have that conversation with them, then that will be helpful as well. So fully support this motion.
Diolch, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Shirley Hodges, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I also echo my concern about people being charged for GP's letters? I've seen a lot of them in my day job. The quality of them is amazingly inconsistent and some of them are just not helpful at all. But the customer or the resident is still getting charged for that letter. So I would urge the council to change its policy. I think it's really sensible. The best person to talk to get information about someone's illness or disability is that person themselves. And anything else that they can actually provide helps in the decision making, but this should be around, all the evidence should be around what the disabled person says, because they have the right to be believed. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Councillor George Carroll is next.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. It must be the priority of any public body to ensure that the services it provides operate as efficiently as possible. They must not be unnecessarily bureaucratic, but at the same time we must also ensure that appropriate checks and balances are in place. And therefore it's important that the authority gets the balance right. Now, it goes without saying that public bodies have a duty to ensure that those accessing services are eligible for said service, and to not do so would be both impractical and irresponsible. But the question then arises as to what evidence is required and the accessibility of said evidence. Any system must obviously be sufficiently rigorous to avoid abuse, while also avoiding creating any unnecessary distress wherever possible. Now, the motion before the Council this evening requests a review of existing systems. It proposes creating a guide for service users and to consider forms of evidence other than a GP letter where appropriate, and I note the leader's comments regarding the fact that in many cases the authority doesn't even require a GP letter and that other forms of evidence may be more appropriate. So for my part, I'm happy for these ideas to be explored further. I do note the proposal of a review. I would reserve my position as to the outcome of that review because it is important that we get the balance right, but as the motion is written this evening, I'm happy to support it.
Diolch, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Mark Wilson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think there's a couple of issues here. I mean, the first thing is consultation. There are organisations out there, such as xiii, where people can share comments. The public can do that, councillors can do that, and talk to xiii as a sounding board to represent the views of patients. And I think that's important that people do lobby them. As you know, that Klaus is actually in Penarth next couple of weeks at various venues and various places. If you look on their website and various, you'll find that information. And clearly that organisation is useful for this as well. It's also important that we have a very active over 55 plus 4 as well in the Vale Glamorgan, and obviously people can make their views there as well. I think it's also important as members that also we help our residents in making sure that when they submit an application, and often it's a rebound, that we don't necessarily say, you know, go to your GP and expect to pay 40 or 50 pounds. I'm sure they got that sufficient evidence anyway. It's a question of just making sure and producing it and giving it to it. And I'm sure our housing team would be quite understanding in that case. But nevertheless, I'm happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Kevin Marnie.
Thank you. Yes, possibly a delicate subject, and I wouldn't want anybody in need to go without, as I'm sure probably, well, hopefully most people, if not everybody, hopes that. I mean, it's fairly obvious that GP surgeries were never taken under the NHS, were they? They're contracted. They were virtually to man and woman private practices, so presumably that's why they're charging. So I would guess we can't demand that a private business doesn't charge for a service. But I think so we've got the old wildlife going off here in my house at the moment. But if we're voting for a review of what's provided, I'm in favour of that. That's fine. The matters, if we're holding other information from other agencies or whatever that would satisfy rather than having to go to a GP, I think that's fine. I mean, I think it was a bit fanciful, and I may have interpreted this wrong. My apologies if I have. I think I heard earlier of a participant, everybody has the right to believe. Bit of a ludicrous statement that, in my view, to be perfectly honest. Anybody can turn up and say anything. But if there are other ways that people's needs can be identified, some of them already held on record or whatever, and we're looking at a review of that, I'd be prepared to, to look into what's proposed and agree or disagree at that stage. So I think I'll abstain tonight, to be honest with you, until somebody comes up with what they propose to actually do, rather than just a blanket, oh, well, that's it, we'll just believe everything anybody says. I'm not suggesting the majority of people have that view, but I think that's what I took from an earlier comment, and I do apologise if I interpret that incorrectly. Thank you.
Diolch, Councillor Marnie. Councillor Sandra Perks.
Thank you, Mayor. As Cabinet Member for Social Housing and Tenancy Engagement, I want to say that I welcome the motion and the opportunity to review what evidence is needed, particularly within, as we're aware, within the housing field, there is a certain level of evidence required for rebanding and things like that. So just to explore what the different bits of information that come from various different organisations, what they actually say, whether they provide an up-to-date evidence of the person's housing needs and things like that. It would be really useful to have that review. So yes, I support the motion and look forward to the results of the review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to the movers' right to speak now.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Just to touch on a few points, and most notably Councillor Marnie's apology, I will accept it because the motion does not sort of start from the premise as he stated. It does, however, start from the premise of we have an obligation and a duty of care to support those who are most vulnerable, and they will already have been assessed, as the motion states, through PIP and through various other forms, including under the Equality Act, that they have a disability which affects their ability to carry out normal day-to-day functions. So that I just wanted to clarify that point. In terms of the review, Councillor Carroll, I take on board your comment, and I am hopeful that what this motion, the principle of it, is around consistency of approach, and hopefully a review will highlight where we are working together, we are effective, and where there are gaps or where there are problems with perhaps communication or lack of information. Then I'm sure that that review will highlight these sort of things. And I think it's around a consistency of approach is fundamental to this motion. And as I've said, when we work together, we are more effective. And I think we recognise through this motion that we can do a little bit better and we can make lives a little bit easier and a little bit more gentler. And I'm, you know, thank you for those that have already said that they will support this motion. Thank you.
Diolch, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. I think we're ready to move to a vote.
Okay, the vote is set up. This isn't a recorded vote. I don't think a request has been made for one. So if members are just happy to vote, I think it's ready, Amy, yeah? Yep. Already? Thank you. Okay, all votes are in, and we just display the results, so that's clearly carried. Thank you, everyone.
Diolch yn fawr. Moving on to questions from members. We've got 13 questions this evening. There's a time limit, 45 minutes, so any questions unanswered at that point will be answered in writing afterwards. So, Councillor Protheroe has the first question to Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Protheroe. As part of our ongoing decarbonisation programme, we have retrofitted energy-saving technologies into 7 community centres, plus CF61 using xiii Cymru ACPW3 capital grants. Our ongoing schools retrofit programme focuses on similar energy and water efficiency technologies. Alongside this, the Sustainable Communities for Learning Capital programme follows strict design standards that include net zero carbon in operation and summertime overheating assessments that are BREEAM compliant. Within this, biodiversity enhancements such as green roofs and sustainable urban drainage are features that alleviate high intensity rainfall. We have a high percentage of eco-school sites, and these features enhance learning opportunities for our pupils. This work supports our builders to be more resilient around their energy needs, particularly as demand and cost rises for heating and cooling. Water efficiency fittings and leak detection support lower water use, which is particularly important in times of drought. During the recent red warning heatwave, our understanding of how our built environment responds to periods of prolonged excessive heat became evident. In order to better understand how our buildings and sites are performing, we are running a survey across all schools. In addition, we will be completing a similar exercise with our community centres in relation to climate resilience. Both initiatives will be progressed with our emergency planning colleagues and support the recommendations of our recently completed Vale PSB climate change risk assessment. In addition to the work in partnership with the PSB partners, work has commenced on the Council's climate adaptation planning. Officers have met in recent weeks to begin looking at how the work across the organisation can be coordinated and learning shared between teams, as well as opportunities to do things differently in response to the need to continue to decarbonise and alongside to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Officers are also working very closely with Welsh Government officials and Future Generations Commissioner and his team to ensure that our work on all aspects of decarbonisation and climate adaptation align closely with national strategies and policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Protheroe, do you have a supplementary?
It was purely, Chair, have we conducted specific risk assessments? And I think the Cabinet member has completely answered all of that. So thanks ever so much for that thorough response.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Hennessy to the leader, Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hennessy. We take the health and safety of all council colleagues very seriously, and we have robust policies alongside procedures and support arrangements in place across the many different departments. These are kept under continuous review with formal policy updates and communications happening. In terms of the specific roles you're asking about, the council has a small health and safety team with one colleague spending the majority of their time supporting the Environment and Housing Directorate. The team have regular health and safety catch-up meetings where we discuss risk assessments, inspections, accident investigations, wellbeing and training. For refuse and cleansing teams, there are risk assessments in place which the team support. The development of these is reviewed annually by the manager. In terms of training, there's an ongoing programme of manual handling training for refuse collectors. At the last meeting, which was in 1st of July 2026, 118 staff had been trained out of 140. The training is combined with conflict management training for cleansing staff. Regular meetings are held with managers, with support being provided around wellbeing action planning, where staff with health issues have reasonable adjustments. The health and safety team have a meeting with drivers and loaders every 6 to 8 weeks where they discuss any issues and then follow up. To support the health and safety of cleansing teams, the corporate team has visited and inspected all toilets and are now monitoring a percentage with a quarterly visit. Recent developments include a review of the needle stick recovery process, which went out to staff via supervisors, and an update to the induction process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett, and Councillor Hennessy has sent his apologies, so won't have a supplementary this evening. Next question, Cynghorydd Wiliam. Cwestiwn I Cynghorydd Mark Wilson.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your question, Councillor Wiliam. The South Central Bathing Waters Project is a stakeholder group convened to provide strategic leadership, collaboration and coordination for a whole catchment approach to improving bathing water quality at Ogmore by Sea and Watchtower Bay. The Catchment Partnership brings together key organisations including Natural Resources Wales, commonly known as NRW, Dai Cymru Welsh Water and the Council, with a shared interest in improving bathing water quality and rural health of the catchment, working collectively to align action and accelerate delivery on improvements. NRW's ambition is to create an integrated approach to catchment resilience. Whilst the immediate priority is addressing bathing water quality, this project aims to bring together wider environmental improvements such as water quality, resilient soils, biodiversity and flood risk management to provide the best opportunity of addressing the many complex issues within the river catchments for these bathing waters. The project will seek to develop a whole catchment plan that blends traditional engineering with nature-based solutions, driving climate resilience for supporting economic growth and community well-being. The Council is a statutory partner for this project, and with our partners are coordinating action across members' organisations to reduce duplication, share data and evidence in order to align interventions with the aim of improving bathing water quality. A further key role for the Council is to facilitate wider community and public engagement with the project, sharing key messages on progress. Wider community engagement is actually encouraged, and local members are advised to contact the NRW project team on bathing waters sc@naturalresources.wales.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Wilson. Oes cwestiwn ychwanegol gyda chi, Cynghorydd Wiliam? Hello. Councillor Wiliam, Cynghorydd Wiliam.
Ydych chi'n gallu clywed fi nawr?
Ydyn, yn berffaith, diolch.
Right. Just i weid, diolch yn...
Thank you very much for that response. I don't have a supplementary. I look forward very much to taking part in this as a local member.
Diolch, Yes. Next question then is from Councillor Protheroe to the Deputy Leader.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Protheroe. Thank you for this question. So it's very timely. You know, we're all sitting here actually melting in the chamber as well, aren't we? And I think does follow on very closely from your first question as well. As we know, the heat waves that we've been experiencing have brought many challenges. And we know that for those who are most vulnerable, it can be even more difficult to manage in these hot temperatures. We also know that areas of higher deprivation are more likely to be disproportionately affected by climate change. For example, due to costs of adaptations to housing, rising food costs, etc., and ability to recover from extreme weather events. And this will also be factored into our work. The Vale Public Services Board, the PSB, have recently worked with consultants to undertake a climate change risk assessment. This has been a partnership approach to consider a number of identified climate risks and how they impact on services and communities. The assessment focused on 5 key themes, including infrastructure and health and well-being, and highlighted the need for plans for extreme weather to improve resilience, to consider the changes needed to care and to consider the changes needed to care homes and health facilities, and for community outreach with our more vulnerable and isolated residents. We will continue to work with our partners through the PSB to address the risks identified. With regards to our current practices and to ensure that we are already taking steps to ensure our more vulnerable residents are supported, I would like to highlight work in social care and housing. Where services are commissioned, social services work closely with providers to ensure that they are able to meet people's needs within their own homes, as we know they can be significantly impacted by heat. The commissioning team offer advice and support on working in heat, and they also work with providers to ensure they are equipped with the skills to meet vulnerable residents' needs which are impacted by heat. During heat waves, local and national advice is provided to providers, and in extreme events we work with providers to ensure that those with the highest levels of needs are prioritised. It's also standard practice that when social workers and social care staff undertake care and support assessments, they assess the environmental factors that impact upon the individual and their families. This includes living arrangements and the appropriateness of the home environment, and where required with the consent of the individual, referrals for support are made to the relevant agency to ensure that these assessed needs are met. Within social services, they already have established risk assessments processes for working at hotter temperatures, and these are updated each time a major heat event impacts upon services to ensure that they evolve to reflect previous learning and are bespoke enough to respond to the new event. Social services are also investing in equipment and technology to help support staff working and residents living within hotter climates. The Welsh Housing Quality Standards, the WHQS, already requires landlords to consider extreme heat and to look to mitigate it as part of the standard for existing tenants. Our housing team took steps in the recent heat wave to reach out to those who are most vulnerable and are looking to share learning and experience to be able to plan more for future events. The housing team are also reviewing sensor data, including from sheltered housing, to understand the heat profile across their estates. And this data will help inform adaptation options. For example, looking at shading options, ways to minimise solar gain, boiler work, behavioural work, etc. As part of Project Zero, we've already had a number of discussions to consider how we develop our work further around climate adaptation to complement the more developed mitigation works in the Climate Change Challenge Plan. This work will involve staff across the organisation, including emergency planning and schools, as well as other frontline services, and will complement the work being undertaken through the PSB and build on existing good practice and learning. We look for opportunities to communicate important health information at times of extreme weather, and sharing information from partners and other sources through a range of different media to provide information and assistance is absolutely paramount. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary question, Councillor Protheroe?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Brooks, for that comprehensive response again. The question was exceedingly timely and unfortunately for my family also impacted on one of my elderly, my father actually, this weekend. So heat stroke is incredibly serious and it's really, really difficult for our elderly. So it's a question really to do with, will the council consider climate risk mapping with our existing social care databases so we can pinpoint the individuals who are both physically and also socially vulnerable from exclusion living on their own, because in our situation we were there, but an elderly person on their own, I would hate to think what could happen. So thank you again.
Councillor Brooks?
Sorry, I must admit, I thought that was actually covered in my response. And I've talked about the risk assessments there, about that working across social services. So I absolutely take on board what you've said. And I think it's absolutely, it's so important that we include that work in. So thank you.
Next question is from Councillor Haines to Councillor Sivanianam.
Thank you, Councillor Haines. And I'd like to take this opportunity to apologise to Councillor Haines for the delay to provide a response to his previous question around brownfield sites at the December's full council meeting. It's entirely an oversight on my part. And at this point, I'd like to advise him that each proposal must be considered on its merits. So it's not possible to apply a blanket approach to all proposals. However, in principle, brownfield land should be prioritised above greenfield land where available. And I'm aware that officers have very significant concerns over the Charleston proposal, which is due to be reported to Planning Committee, I think, this week. And I know that, Councillor Haines, you have already put in your response and comments to that.
Councillor Haines, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, if I may. It's not really a question that much. It's to thank you for the ultimate answer to the question. And I hope I don't have to wait 225 days for an answer till the next question answer. Thank you, Councillor.
The next question is from Councillor Hodges to Councillor Birch. Nick Hodges, sorry.
Right, thank you for the question, very timely. In order to learn lessons and prepare for future events, I can advise you that council officers are currently gathering feedback from all schools via an e-survey to understand how they experienced the heatwave during the week commencing 22nd of June. This will give us valuable insight into the measures schools implemented to improve comfort levels for both pupils and staff and help inform our future response. In parallel, we are reviewing live data from sites where classroom sensors are in place, specifically looking at temperature and CO2 levels. This will support a more evidence-based understanding of how different buildings perform under extreme heat conditions. We recognise that the experience of heat will vary significantly across our school estate, reflecting differences in building age, design and surrounding environments. Urban settings, for example, may experience higher ambient temperatures compared with schools located near open green spaces or with more extensive outdoor areas.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Hodges, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, just briefly, thank you for that. It is timely. It's still timely as well. When it comes to climate change, in the winter we now have warm spaces, and perhaps in the summer we may be offering in the future cool spaces. Who knows? My question really is, when it comes to schools, my heart goes out to the pupils, especially who are and the staff undertaking exams at this time. That can't be helpful or comfortable. I was just wondering if you envisage in the future that we may be asking government to adjust term times to suit the seasons better.
Wow.
Just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a national, I've got cross, but it's certainly an interesting thought, isn't it? I will say that obviously we've had air conditioning suggested to us by several people who obviously have no idea about installation or running costs or whatever. And obviously we've got to think about zero carbon, which I think we're all in favour of, aren't we? So all of those things have to be looked at. I mean, it's interesting, the Victorian schools, which we've always complained about as being hard to heat, are now in fact cool spaces. Most of them have got very high ceilings and stone floors, which is absolutely fantastic. You can just go and lie on them all day. So yeah, obviously, I think everybody's going to be looking at all of this stuff in as much detail as possible, because, I mean, not within the Vale, but I've certainly heard stories from other authorities where they've had to send pregnant women home because the temperatures are so awful. And you get lots of people saying, oh, you're being really kind of flaky about this. But I mean, 32 children in a classroom that are 38 degrees, plus teaching staff, no through drafts. And there are certain types of buildings that are more likely to be difficult than others. I mean, we've got South Point, which actually is, fantastic and is able to cope with all of this. But certainly the kind of like 60s, 70s type buildings just were not built for this at all. So yeah, we'll be looking at it in detail, you can be sure.
Diolch, Councillor Birch. And next question's from Councillor Penn to the leader.
Diolch, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Penn. I apologise in advance. It's quite a lengthy response, but I have to say I and my Cabinet colleagues have welcomed the removal of the two-child limit in universal credit, which will support work on child poverty nationally and locally, and most importantly will make a real difference to the lives of many children and their families. In considering our work to tackle poverty, it's worth noting that in the Vale we have 7 lower super output areas, or LSOAs, in the top 10% of the most deprived LSOAs in Wales, according to the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation 2025. And a further 4 LSOAs are included in the 10 to 20% most deprived in Wales. There's a consistent correlation between these areas and higher proportions of people on lower incomes who are in receipt of universal credit and in receipt of unemployment support. These groups have been identified as most vulnerable to the impacts of the cost of living crisis and experiences of deprivation. With regard to universal credit, some figures that we have available we can consider are that in January 2026, the latest data available, a total of 15,436 people were in receipt of universal credit in the Vale of Glamorgan. 9,977 of those in receipt of universal credit were not in employment, while 5,434 were in employment. This represents 8% of total number of people in employment in the Vale of Glamorgan. Over 5,400 households, around 10% of households in the Vale of Glamorgan, were in receipt of universal credit and had a child. Just over 20% of these households had 3 or more children. In answering this question, I'd like to draw attention to the draft annual assessment report considered by Cabinet on the 9th of July, which detailed the significant amount of work being undertaken across the Council as part of our commitments in Vale 2030 to prioritise tackling poverty. This report demonstrates that many services across the Council are identifying opportunities to engage with residents and provide information, services and support, building on existing services and utilising grant funding. The Cabinet report describes work being undertaken across all directorates, including employment and housing support, a review of the information on the Council's cost of living web pages, use of food insecurity and warm spaces funding, support with fuel poverty, and the launch of Vale Family Compass, as well as a range of activities provided by the Council's Healthy Living team. This work is integral to delivering our vision of strong communities with a bright future. Our work to tackle poverty is mission-led and is set out clearly in Vale 2030. Across all 5 objectives in Vale 2030, there are commitments that will deliver our priority of tackling poverty. For example, under the objective giving everyone a good start in life, we commit to focus on families of children living in poverty and help them to increase their income, access food and housing, and escape poverty through wraparound support and advice services. And you may have heard that we're just going to be able to extend our young people's services as a result of Youth Hub funding. Under the objective supporting and protecting those who need us, we've committed to deliver an integrated programme of work to prevent and tackle poverty with a particular focus on our most deprived communities. And these are just some examples of the ambition set out in Vale 2030. I'm proud of what's already been achieved within the first year of Vale 2030, and the Cabinet report referred to earlier has the following highlights. In 2025-26, Communities for Work Plus provided specialist employment advice and intensive mentoring to support people into employment, with 400 participants engaged against a target of 300. And 172 individuals supported into employment against a target of 140. That's both well over target. The Flying Start childcare offer is expanded across targeted areas and now supports 934 postcodes, and over 280 children were offered childcare in 2025-26. The Vale Family Compass launched in November 2025 as the integrated front door for early help and statutory children's services, providing a single clear point of access for families and professionals. So similar to how we were talking earlier about simplifying access, simplifying services, that's what we're doing through the Vale Family Compass. The youth service targeted projects are supporting young people eligible for free school meals who are referred into the service for wellbeing support, NEET prevention, that's not in education, employment or training, and homelessness prevention support. In 2025-26, 167 young people were supported, and as I mentioned, we've got further funding from the UK Youth Hub programme to expand that. Portable play equipment has supported delivery of community sessions and family fun days across locations in the Vale, providing free play opportunities, ideas for no or low cost play, and awareness of local spaces that can be used for play. And capital improvements to play spaces of enhanced inclusion, helping to create environments that are welcoming, accessible and suitable for all children. The work planned in Pencoitra with improvements to the splash pad park and skate park, which complements the work in Palmerston as well on the multi-use games area and play park, are further examples of our investment in communities. Earlier this month, I asked the Council's strategic leadership team to reflect on the work being taken forward and consider how we build momentum around this work, with a focus on how we make support and services easier to access for our residents and ensure we have an integrated approach. Again, that works well with the motion today. Is it not acceptable rather, that the level of inequalities still exist across the Vale, and that is why we are asking teams across the council to work together and consider what more they can do, how they can connect more with colleagues, and how they can work with partners to improve services. We're looking to break down the barriers to accessing services and to build on the great work in our schools, at the pod, the Family Compass Service, Wellbeing Matters, and many others. As such, I can assure you that we're developing services locally that, together with changes being made nationally, are supporting our families and are making a difference. A dedicated report on poverty and the cost of living crisis will be considered by Cabinet in the coming weeks too. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Councillor Penn, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Leader, for that brief answer. Growing up on child benefit, I know how important this money is, and you covered my supplementary in that, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Carroll to Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Carroll, for your question. The Council's local lettings policy, approved by Cabinet in December 2025, aims to balance the needs of local communities with the need to house those in the greatest housing need. For the first letting of most newly built homes, priority is given to applicants who have both a strong local connection and a high housing need.
Sorry to interrupt. Councillor Champion's put his hand up.
Can I just tell me how much longer we've got at those 45 minutes?
We have 15 minutes or so.
Right.
16.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Less time now. I've forgotten where I am. I'll start again. The Council's local lettings policy, approved by Cabinet in December 2025, aims to balance the needs of the local communities with the need to house those in the greatest housing need. For the first letting of most newly built homes, priority is given to applicants who have both a strong local connection and a high housing need, either Gold Plus or Gold. If homes remain available, they are offered to other applicants in priority order based on housing need. This approach applies only to the initial allocation of new build properties. Future vacancies are normally allocated through the Council's Home for You scheme in accordance with the Housing Allocations Policy, where priority is based on housing need. An exception applies to the rural exception sites and minor rural settlements, where local connection requirements continue to apply to both first lets and future relets to help meet local housing needs and support sustainable rural communities. The policy therefore seeks to support local communities whilst ensuring that affordable housing is available to those in the greatest need across the Vale. Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, you have
please. Thank you. Thank the Cabinet Member for her answer. In the Shropshire village of Stoke Heath, residents were rightly concerned by plans now dropped after public opposition to house up to 83 asylum seekers in £250,000 new build homes within the community.
No.
Will the Cabinet Member confirm that this authority will never support using new build homes in the Vale of Glamorgan to house asylum seekers? Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realise that my area actually covered Shropshire, but I don't think that actually is a supplementary to what you've asked here about. It's got to relate to the question. Your question's around allocation of new build homes within the Vale of Glamorgan, so it has to relate to that.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Councillor Collins to Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Collins, for your question. The Council has previously considered a request to introduce a one-way system on Kingston Crescent approximately 10 years ago. Following an assessment, the proposal was not supported, as it was considered likely to increase vehicle speeds, displace traffic onto neighbourhood streets and adversely affect local traffic movements. No recent assessment has been undertaken in relation to one-way traffic arrangements on St Mary's Avenue, Castle Land Street, Station Street, Kingston Crescent or other streets south of Holton Road, and there are currently no proposals on consideration for such measures.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Collins?
Sorry, I was just trying to find it then. Thank you. So, thank you for that. I have raised this in previous council meetings before. The residents in that area have asked me about this, and what would allow this to reach the threshold for action? What would need to happen? You ask any delivery driver, any taxi driver, majority of residents, those streets aren't wide enough for two-way traffic.
Thank you.
If, like you and any other member, could send me that as a written email, then I get an officer to respond.
Diolch. Next question is from Councillor Carroll to Councillor Brooks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Carroll, for your question. The council manages, the council manages and runs the country parks with the safety of visitors to the park at its core. Health and safety colleagues are immediately informed of any accidents or safety issues, and the countryside manager will ensure any issues are rectified immediately. Rangers are trained in first aid and defibrillators are available at both Porthkerry and Cosmeston. Sadly, the parks do on occasion suffer from some poor behaviour from visitors, which can lead to health and safety issues. This includes unauthorised and unsafe use of the water, aggressive behaviour to staff and other visitors, and misuse and damage to park equipment or facilities. Rangers work closely with the council's enforcement team and the police to try and manage poor behaviour where possible and when the parks are open. This included recently the police serving a dispersal order on the park at the request of the council, which sought to disperse a large group of youths who would abuse park staff. The council is also seeking to secure points where dangerous entry to the water have been created by damage to existing fencing and to try and prevent dangerous behaviour, such as jumping from high banks and trees through additional fencing and signage. Ultimately, the country parks are there for all to enjoy, and all visitors need to respect the ethos of the parks. And when the council can seek to ensure public safety is paramount to the management of the important green spaces, visitors are also responsible for their own safety and behaviour. Thank you.
Is there a supplementary?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet Member for her answer. In her answer, the Cabinet Member referred to unauthorised open water swimming at country parks. This obviously includes open water swimming at Cosmeston Lakes recently. Does the Council therefore accept that its decision to open an aqua park at Cosmeston was a mistake, and will it rule out the aqua park ever returning in future?
Oh, how predictable. There is a clear distinction between the authorised and supervised water-based activities that took place at Cosmeston Lakes last summer and recent incidents of unauthorised and unsupervised swimming. The activities on the lake last year operated under strict safety controls with qualified lifeguards and comprehensive risk management measures in place, including regular safety briefings and the mandatory use of wetsuits and life vests. It was a temporary and managed activity within a small, shallow section of the lake. By contrast, vast areas of the lake contain hazards that make unsupervised swimming dangerous, including the risk of drowning, cold water shock, and ultimately serious injury and death. And I think we've all seen that over these last few weeks, all around the country, actually, and in other countries as well. Unsupervised swimming presents a genuine risk to life. Tragically, there have been a number of fatal accidents across the UK involving people entering open water in unsupervised environments. There is no ambiguity about our position on water safety, and conflating a temporary and supervised activity with unauthorised swimming risks created a false impression that the rules and safety advice is somehow unclear. It is not. Restrictions, warning signage, and enforcement measures are in place for one reason, which is to protect lives. Any suggestion that this distinction is unclear has the potential to undermine vital public safety messaging and place people at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Cowpe's question is again to Councillor Brooks.
Sorry, I should have turned my mic off, should I? Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cope, for your question. From a planning permission perspective, post offices operate either as part of or wholly as an A1 retail store. While the planning policies of the LDP would resist a change of use away from A1 on policy grounds, there is no individual policy protection for a post office, especially when this relates to a closure of an existing counter or store, which in itself does not require planning permission. However, the Council recognises the vital role that a post office plays in a village, particularly for older residents, people without access to transport, small businesses and those who rely on cash and face-to-face services. The legal position is that the council cannot require Post Office Limited to keep a branch open. Decisions about branch closures, relocations or operating models rest with Post Office Limited within the national framework set by UK government. Nonetheless, the council can support the community in a lawful and practical way, and this could include making formal representations to Post Office Limited, working with ward members, the community council, MPs and MSs, helping gather evidence of the local impact, encouraging residents to respond to any consultation and exploring whether an alternative local operator, community facility or outreach model could be viable. The same issue was faced by Cowbridge several years ago, and this sort of local supermarket taking on the service. On this point, I am aware that the Chief Executive has already made representations to the Post Office expressing concern at the potential closure. And the Chief Executive has received a reply which has been shared with local members and which I've seen sight of myself. Accordingly, while the Council cannot compel the Post Office to remain open, it can use its influence, evidence and partnership role to support the local campaign and help the community make the strongest possible case. Thank you.
Councillor Cowp, your supplementary. If you have one.
Councillor Cowp, would you mind turning on your microphone, please?
We can't hear you at the moment, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Is it on now?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, my question is, will the Cabinet member agree to meet with post office officials and local councillors to discuss the closure of this post office?
I don't think I'm actually in the position to do that. As I said, the Chief Executive has already written and we've had that response, and that they are actively seeking a new sort of venue or place or facility for that post office. And I think they are going to keep us updated as well. So I think that's a really important role for us to play in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll's question to Councillor Sivanianam.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. The candidate site promotion was supported by transport assessment, which modelled the impact of the proposed development at North West Barry on the Waycock Cross roundabout. In addition, the Council commissioned a strategic transport assessment, which considers the cumulative impact of all major housing allocations identified in the RLDP on the strategic highway network. This assessment utilised data from Transport for Wales's South East Wales transport model to consider both the baseline capacity and forecast capacity as a result of our RDL development.
Supplementary.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The site at Waycock Cross, like that at Eastbrook Road in Dinas Powys, lies at the edge of the settlement boundary. Does the Council recognise that allowing development on green fields at locations such as these encroaches onto the natural barriers that separate our communities, and that this will, over time, result in urbanisation to such an extent that our towns and villages will lose their individual identity and character?
No.
Councillor Carroll's next question is to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, for your question. Fly tipping remains a priority issue for the Council, and we continue to take a robust and proactive approach to tackling it through both enforcement and prevention. Our waste enforcement team investigates reported incidents, gathers evidence, and where appropriate issues fits penalty notices or pursues prosecution against those responsible. We also work closely with South Wales Police, Natural Resources Wales, local landowners and town and community councils to share intelligence and focus activity on known hotspots across the Vale. Alongside enforcement, we are committed to making it as easy as possible for residents to dispose of waste responsibly through our curbside collection services, household waste recycling centres and bulky waste collection service. We can utilise CCTV and target monitoring where appropriate, and are exploring further investment in digital technology to strengthen our ability to tackle persistent problem locations. In addition, we undertake public awareness campaigns and ensure that prompt removal of fly tipping waste to reduce its impact on local communities and the environment. We continue to encourage residents to report incidents and to use only licensed waste carriers, as preventing waste from ending up in the hands of rogue operators remains one of the most effective ways of reducing fly tipping across the Vale.
Go ahead.
I thank the Cabinet Member for his answer, particularly his comments regarding CCTV and surveillance equipment that I know is much required. The Leckwith Road laybys are one of many fly tipping hotspots across the Vale of Glamorgan, with another incident sadly reported within recent weeks. Will the Council commit to undertaking a fresh analysis of all those locations where incidents are reported most frequently and ensure that surveillance equipment is deployed at those sites to create a deterrent and catch those responsible?
The answer is yes.
Thank you. And we've got time, I think, to squeeze in the final question from Councillor Carroll to the leader.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll, and thank you, Mayor. The Council's assessment is that the reforms to the scrutiny arrangements introduced last year have been broadly effective in strengthening the scrutiny function and aligning it more closely with the Council's corporate priorities and governance objectives. The annual scrutiny report is due to be presented at the next meeting of full Council, and this provides a range of information surrounding scrutiny work and the difference it is making, alongside reflections upon the effectiveness of scrutiny. As you'll be aware, Audit Wales has also undertaken an external review of the changes, as we promised when proposing the changes initially. Whilst I've not seen the final report, I am aware the findings are generally positive, reflecting the improvements made, whilst identifying some areas for further improvement, which we will respond to. The findings are due to be shared at the joint performance scrutiny in a fortnight's time on the 22nd of July, alongside wider reflections on scrutiny as part of the annual self-assessment process. So you're welcome to share your views then and at Governance and Audit Committee's consideration of the audit in September. Finally, it would be remiss of me not to indicate that the success of scrutiny is the responsibility of all members within this chamber, irrespective of their political party. Thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
I thank the leader for her answer. At a recent meeting of the Resources Scrutiny Committee, when I attempted to ask a series of follow-up questions and delve into the detail of the initial answers provided, I was told by the chair that this is not a cross-examination. Given that probing questioning is essential to provide the detailed scrutiny required, will the leader introduce changes to scrutiny arrangements to allow this to take place as standard practice at all scrutiny committee meetings?
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I think scrutiny is a good opportunity to delve further into service delivery and how it can be improved. However, the whole purpose of having reports circulated well in advance of scrutiny is it actually allows members to contact officers in advance and to explore those questions, so that we don't have, in some ways, what feels like a barrage of questions on an area where you're not necessarily going to get the correct depth of information that we would all want. So I haven't actually watched that resources scrutiny. I normally do attend. I will watch it and reflect on it, but I think, as I said, every member has responsibility for the effectiveness of scrutiny, so therefore every member has a responsibility to read all those papers, in advance and make sure that they fully understand the evidence and information being presented. And if not, contact officers for clarification so that they can contribute in the best possible way at that scrutiny meeting. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Burnett. I have no urgent items under part 1 and no urgent items under part 2, so I'll bring this meeting to a close. Bydd y cyfarfod nesaf ar yr 8 o Fedi. Diolch yn...
28th of September, next meeting.
Thank you.